Okay, session 3, muscular system. Let's learn about it. So we're going to have our summary first, then we're going to talk about the functions of the muscular system. We're going to talk about the different types and characteristics of all muscles, the different areas and movements associated with the muscular system. We're going to talk about the muscles of the head and the trunk. We're going to talk about the muscles of our arms and legs, our upper extremities and lower extremities. We're going to talk about our medical roots, and then we're going to close it off with diseases and conditions. Okay, so summary first. So the muscular system consists of 3 different types of muscles, including skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, and cardiac muscles. So what do you guys think skeletal muscles are used for? And everyone should answer this question, everyone. Yes, skeletal muscles are attached to our bones, and they move our bones using tendons, and every movement associated with our skeletal muscles are voluntary movements. But for the other 2 types, smooth muscles and cardiac muscles, we have involuntary movements. So basically what smooth muscles are, they're the tissues that control the involuntary movements of internal organs, such as the organs of the digestive system, which allows food to move through the system. We also have smooth muscle tissues in our blood vessels, which allow the blood vessels to constrict and stretch, and that controls our body temperature. It regulates how much blood is going to flow through our veins, how much heat that blood is going to hold. And next and lastly, we have cardiac muscle tissue. So when I say cardiac muscle tissue, what does that bring to mind? Heart. Yes, cardiac muscle tissue. So cardiac muscle tissue is only used in one place in the body, and you guys are already typing it out, but where is that place? Heart. It is the heart. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Also, just type your questions out in the chat. I'm looking at it while I'm looking at the slide. Okay, great. If anyone has them, just type them out, and I will answer them. Okay. So I wanted to do some fun facts about the muscular system because honestly, every single system is just fun and amazing to learn about. So 40% of our total weight is made up of muscles. So what do you think is something else that makes up a lot of our weight? We have fat, we have, what else? I think fat's the main one. Yeah. And another fact is that the heart pumps about 5 quarts of blood per minute, which in total would be about 2,000 gallons every single day. Our blood, our hearts, everyone's hearts pumps about 2,000 gallons per day of, I think that's the strongest pump I know. And then we have the gluteus maximus. Everyone knows that. I know you guys know that. Who knows that? Type yes if you know what the gluteus maximus is. Yeah, it is the muscle that surrounds our hips. It is the body's largest muscle. Okay, well, we'll go over it later for those of you who do not know what the gluteus maximus is. The ear contains the smallest muscles in our body alongside the smallest bones. We're going to go over this later in the nervous system, what those smallest bones are. We have a muscle called the masseter in our jaw, which is the strongest muscle by weight. Yeah, the ear has bones. We're going to go over it. It's super cool. I don't want to spoil it. We're going to go over it. So the masseter is the strongest muscle by weight. It allows the teeth to close with a force of up to 55 pounds on the incisors or 200 pounds on our molars. So I think that is cool. So basically the bones in the ear, inside the ear, in our inner ear, are very tiny, very, very tiny. The cartilage forms the outside of our ear, our outer ear. Okay, so now we're gonna go over the functions. Before I go though, does anyone have any questions about the fun facts? If you have any questions, just type them out. Okay, now we're gonna go over the function of the muscular system. So what the muscular system does is it attaches to bones and regulates movement and posture as well as protects organs. We have over 600 muscles in the body. Movement of muscles is controlled by the nervous system, which we're going to talk about later. The only muscle that's actually completely independent is cardiac muscle, because if it wasn't, our heart would not be beating all the time. Yes, so muscles are important because if you have bones, that's not going to do anything. The bones can't move by themselves. The nervous system sends impulses through nerves to our muscles, which connect to bones, and basically when they contract, the bones move. We're going to talk about that. Yeah, I can go back a slide. And again, all of these slides are going to be in the video that we post on YouTube, and I'll send the link out by email later. Yes, cardiac muscles have involuntary movement. Are we good? I don't know how much fat the muscles hold, but I can definitely get back to you on that. I'm actually going to write it down right now so I can answer it later. And like we talked about last week, most of our fat is contained in the hypodermis, which is the third deepest layer of our skin. And it's fat is basically made up of adipocytes, which are our fat cells. So they store the fat. So now we're going to go over specific functions of the muscular system. We have mobility. What do you guys think mobility is? Movement. Yes. So our muscles help with movement, with skeletal muscles. Speed. Okay. And they also help with stability. They help with our posture. They hold our body up. They help with circulation and respiration. They help us breathe. They help us move our blood throughout our blood vessels. It helps with digestion. Does anyone remember from the summary which muscle helped with digestion? Which type of muscle? Smooth. Yes, smooth muscle helps with digestion. We have urination, childbirth, and vision. Muscles make up a lot of our eye. We have organ protection and temperature regulation. So does anyone remember what I talked about? It also has to do with smooth muscle, how that works. How our muscles help with temperature regulation? Does anyone remember that? Muscles vibrate. Okay, so what they do is that smooth muscles line our blood vessels, and when the muscles constrict and dilate, it basically regulates how much blood can actually flow through the blood vessels. They're inside the arteries. Yeah, creating sweat is also something that has to do with the integumentary system. That is how the integumentary system controls temperature regulation. Okay, so now that we've gone over the functions, does anyone have a question? Yes, the brain is a muscle. It's made up out of muscular tissue. But the brain is considered part of the nervous system. Okay, types and characteristics of muscles. So we're going to go over muscle tissue types. We have the 3 different types of tissues that we talked about earlier: skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. So skeletal muscle is the only voluntary muscle in our body. Any type of skeletal muscle. It attaches to bone. It's striated, which basically means it has like kind of bands that have alternating light and dark colors. And skeletal muscle produces heat and energy for the body through the movement. Does anyone have any questions about skeletal muscle? I think the reason it's called smooth is because it doesn't have striations. Voluntary in this context means that our brain doesn't automatically control our muscles. When we have impulses running through our body saying, and the brain brings an impulse back down to the muscles in our skeletal muscles, it basically tells the muscle to move. It tells it to contract. And when that muscle contracts, the bone that it's actually connected to, it moves. So like when you're flexing your biceps, it's basically telling your muscles to contract and then your bones move, which gives it, we're going to go over it later in a different topic, but so striated means, do you guys see like the little lines in the skeletal muscle? That's what it means by striated. But in the smooth muscle, in the picture in the middle, it doesn't have that. It's just smooth. And in cardiac muscle, it is also striated. And it also has branches. So for smooth muscles, it is found in the internal organs of the body and in blood vessels. It is also called visceral muscle, and it has no striations. And the next muscle we have is cardiac muscle, and like we talked about, it is only found in the heart. And the cells, cardiac muscle cells, they die after 30 seconds. They need a constant supply of oxygen. They are striated and branched. Does anyone have any questions? What do you guys mean by bloodline? Basically, all cells have a life. They replicate and then they eventually die off. But that's the cell cycle. That's a whole different thing. For cardiac muscle, I'm not sure the reason of why they die off so quickly. It's probably because they need constant nutrition and supply because, again, it is the strongest muscle in the, not strongest muscle. It pumps so much blood that it really needs all of that nutrition and oxygen. Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about muscle tissue characteristics. So we have 5 characteristics in every single type of muscle, and it basically gives muscles the ability to do what they do. So automaticity, that is one of the characteristics of muscles. It's basically the ability muscles have to move on its own. We have contractibility. That's basically muscle fibers that are stimulated by nerves, and when those muscle fibers contract, the muscle becomes shorter, which causes movement. We have elasticity. So when I say elasticity, what does that bring to mind? What word? Yeah, like rubber bands, elastic. So when they contract, they go back to normal. They go back to their normal shape. So they have that ability to do that. We have excitability. So when you get excited, like, do you guys understand, like, excited means like you charge up? So basically, muscles do the same thing. They kind of charge up. They have the ability to respond to stimulus, nerve impulse. So when our brain tells us, okay, you need to move your arm, or you need to flex your bicep, it's going to send the stimulus to the bicep, the electricity to the bicep, and it contracts, which moves your forearm. Your forearm is basically the area between your elbow and your wrist. Yes, they're nerves. Do feelings connect with excitability? Definitely. Definitely, I think so. So the 5th and the last characteristic we're going to talk about is extensibility. So in medicine, when we say extend, we mean straighten. So in this case, it would be the ability to stretch. Our muscles can stretch. Does anyone have any questions about the 5 characteristics of muscle tissue types? Okay, I think we're good. If you have any questions, just keep them coming. Now, we have organization of muscles. So in this case, we're going to be talking about skeletal muscle. It has many, many layers, but I'm going to do the 8, I think 7 most I find important. So we have skeletal muscle here, and so the first layer would be the tendon, and below it we would have deep fascia, deep tissue, and below that we would have the epimysium, and below that the perimysium. We have the fascicle, endomysium, and then muscle fibers. So all of these connect together, and they do their thing, and they contract. They move our bones. They move our internal organs. All of these things work together, and the thing controlling them is what? They don't control directly. We're going to talk about that later in the nervous system. They do not connect to the brain directly. So I think we're good here. Yeah, kind of like little tiny strings, tiny cells just working together one after another, sending electricity through our body. So we have, so that thing that they're connecting to, which sends it to the brain, is our nerves. And there's 2 types of systems in our nervous system, but we'll get to that later. Yes, I can go back. Also, if you don't get it down now, that's completely fine. You can go back to the video and you'll hear me talking and you'll see all of these slides. I know I go a little bit fast. Yeah, it can get a little confusing. For when I was actually learning it in our classroom, in the classroom, it was hard for me to get it at first, but it's awesome. And once you get the hang of it, once you learn more, once you get the names kind of like impressed into your mind, you start to get it. And you don't have to memorize everything, but this is a great introduction that if you go into healthcare, you will have to learn about these things in college and high school if you take those classes. Yeah, you can type, if you can't type notes while I'm talking, just pay attention right now, just go back to the video and then you can type them out later. Okay, we're going to talk about agonists and antagonists. So what agonists do is they cause the first movement. So when the impulse is sent from the brain to the muscle, it contracts. So that muscle that contracts causes the primary movement. And antagonists work against the primary movement. So there's always 2 muscles that are always working in pairs. And an example of this would be when biceps flex, when they contract, our triceps relax. So in this case, what would be the agonist? What would be the agonist in the example of the biceps and triceps? Nope, it would not be the triceps. It would not be the triceps. So the biceps are the agonists because when the impulse is sent to the bicep, that's what contracts. But the triceps are relaxing. It's working against that primary movement. So the triceps are the antagonists. So agonist is like the good guy, antagonist, like in stories, is kind of like the bad guy. So agonist is starting the movement, but antagonist is like, no, man, I don't want to, I don't agree with that, so I'm going to do the opposite. So it's kind of like that. I'm sorry. I really hope I didn't say it wrong. But yeah, so biceps are the agonists and antagonists are the triceps. Okay, now we're going to talk about major muscles. These are just the major muscles. We'll go deeper into it, but just this is introduction. Yes, it can get confusing. Just hang on. So frontalis. The frontalis muscle is basically the muscle covering our forehead. It raises our eyebrows and wrinkles our forehead. So when I'm surprised with something and my eyebrows go up, and what muscle is kind of working right now? Your brain is definitely working. the frontalis is working, because that is the muscle covering your forehead. Yes, the brain sends the impulse to the eyebrows, and that's, not to the eyebrows, the frontalis, and that's when the frontalis lifts, raising the eyebrows and wrinkling the forehead. Okay, next we have the gluteus maximus, which extends the hip. Yes, the gluteus maximus is the muscle that covers your buttocks. That is the muscle. And we have pectoralis major, which abducts the humerus and moves the scapula. Like, some of you might not know what abducts means. We're going to go over that later. But for right now, when I say the word abduct, what does that make you think? Capture, to take away, kidnap, take. Yes, yes. All of those work. So we're going to go over this later, but just for right now, for you to understand what the pectoralis major does, it abducts the humerus, and what it does is that it's taking the humerus away from the midline. So when you're abducting the humerus and your arms are moving up, they're going away from the midline of your body, the middle of your body. So it's abducting the humerus. Do you guys understand that now? Does anyone get what I'm talking about? Abducting the humerus? The midline is basically the middle of your body. So like your nose, your belly button, that would be the midline of your body, that area. So when you're raising your arms up, your arms are at your sides first. They're near your midline. They're near your legs. But when you're putting them up, your hands are nowhere near your legs anymore. They're moving away from your midline. We have, and then it moves the scapula. The scapula is basically the muscle by your shoulder. So when you want to maybe, when you're raising your hands, you're raising your arms, and maybe if you're like doing a jumping jack and your arms are going up, it's also moving your shoulder. So that pectoralis major controls both things. We have the triceps brachii, which extends the forearm. The forearm is basically the part of your arm that's below your elbow but above your wrist. And when you say extends, it means like straighten. So you're straightening your forearm. So that's what the triceps brachii does. We have the latissimus dorsi, which is responsible for the rotation of the back, and it brings the arm down. So when our pectoralis major basically let us bring our arms up, but the latissimus dorsi does the opposite. It brings our arms down. It brings it closer to the body. And that would basically be called adducting our arm. It is bringing it closer to our body. We're going to go over that later, so don't worry about it right now. And next we have the abdominal muscles. What does that bring to mind? Abdominal muscles. Where do you think that is? Abs, abdomen, abdominal. Yeah, so it would be in your abdomen. Our abdominal muscles flex the spine. So all of these muscles, they have so many different functions, but these are the main functions that help control movement in our body. Okay, we have more, if you guys thought that was it. We have the trapezius, which brings back the arms and tilts our head back. Our trapezius connects to our occipital bone. Does anyone remember where the occipital bone is? The occipital bone is the origin, the place where it starts for the trapezius. Does anyone remember what the occipital bone is? No. The occipital bone is it's basically the back of your head, the lower part of your head, the lower back part of your head. I don't want to use medical terms, posterior and inferior. So it is right above your neck, that area. That's where it connects to. We have the sartorius, which brings our hip to our knee. It connects our hip to our knee. So that little band of muscle, one end is at the hip and the other end is at the knee. So I'm guessing that the origin for the sartorius would be the hip and the insertion would be the knee. So when you're putting your knee up, when you're raising your knee, the area that's moving is your knee. So that's where the insertion would be. So like when you think about this, kind of understand where the origin and where the insertion might be. What is staying the same and what is moving? Okay, we have the biceps femoris. So when I say femoris, what does that remind you of? We talked about it. Femoris, femur. Yes, femur. So this is the front of your thigh. This is where, basically above your femur. It flexes your leg. And we have the rectus femoris, also femur. It is at the back of the thigh. Oh, sorry, I mixed those two up. Biceps femoris is at the back of the thigh, and rectus femoris is at the front of your thigh. And it straightens your leg. It extends your leg. We have our gastrocnemius, which helps us tiptoe, and it is at the back of our shin. The shin is basically the area that's below your knee and above your ankle. We have the tibialis anterior, which is at the front of the shin, and it is responsible for dorsiflexion and extending or straightening the tarsals. So we're going to go over dorsiflexion later. Don't worry about that right now. But it's basically, when I say extending your tarsals, what do I mean? Extends and straightens. And what is tarsals? Does anyone remember? Probably not. No. The tarsals are our toes. They're the bones of our foot. So when we're extending our tarsals, we're extending our toes. Okay. That was the tibialis anterior. Now we're going to go over areas and movements. Okay, so like we talked about, origin and insertion, the attachment site. Wait, did I already go over this? I think I accidentally. No, okay. So our origin is where the muscle starts. So the bicep would start near the shoulder, and the insertion would be basically where our elbow is. That would be the end of our... Guys, did we go over this slide already? Have you guys learned this? No, okay, I just want to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to go deeper into it now. So attachment site. So what does attachment site mean? A place where it connects. So for our biceps, our origin would be near our shoulder, and our insertion would be near our elbow. That's where, so an origin basically means when that muscle contracts, that attachment site does not move. And insertion would be when that muscle contracts, that attachment site moves. Okay, so if we were flexing our biceps, just take a look at the left side of this diagram. If we were flexing our biceps, which attachment site would move? Which place would move? I know it's kind of confusing to explain this. I'm sorry. Yes, our elbow area. So when that muscle contracts, it's going to pull our arm up, our forearm, the place between our wrists and our elbow. That's going to move. The scapula, the shoulder, is not going to move. Okay, don't worry about this, guys. You'll get it. And then so tendons are what connects muscle to bone. It is a flexible but inelastic cord of strong fibrous collagen tissue. So when we're connecting our muscle to our bones, it has to be flexible. But if it was elastic, like if it stretched and then it went back to the same thing, do you think we could move our muscles the way we do? Like if things could just like stretch? No, it wouldn't. But for ligaments, we have it's a short band of tough, flexible connective tissue, and ligaments connect bone to bone. So this has nothing to do with the muscular system. It has everything to do with the skeletal system when we connect a bone to bone. Can you rip a tendon? Yes, you can have an inflamed tendon. Yes, definitely. You can have a lot of conditions relating to your tendon. The inflammation of a tendon would be called tendinitis. Tendon would be the root, and itis would be the suffix. Itis would mean inflammation. Anyway, movements associated with the muscles. Of course, very painful. So, like I talked about before, abduction and adduction. Abduction would be leading away from the midline, and abduction would be leading away from the midline. So it's basically when you move your arms up, when you're doing a jumping jack, your arms are going up. So it's moving away from your midline. Yeah, they kind of do sound the same, but abduction kind of has an abduct word in it, and adduction has the adduct part. So adduction is leading towards the midline. You're bringing your arms down after you're done with a jumping jack. It's coming back towards the middle of your body. So when you're doing a jumping jack, you're starting off with abduction and you're ending it with adduction. Abduction, adduction, abduction, adduction. Try saying it multiple times. It's hard. Okay, next we have inversion and eversion. So inversion would be, yes, we have a quizzes today, if we have time. You can definitely do it after class if we don't have time. So inversion basically is turning in. It's like the movement of turning in. So you see the first picture, the woman is turning the soles of her feet toward the midline of her body, toward the middle of her body. So that would be inversion, inside, turning in. And eversion would be turning out. Her feet are moving outwards, away from the midline of the body. So that's what inversion and eversion is. Does anyone have any questions about anything we've studied before this? Okay. So we have elevation and depression. So elevation, like elevator, bringing something higher, hiring something. And then we have depression, which would be lowering something. So in this picture, when we bring our shoulders up, it's elevation. And when we bring them down, it's depression. We're lowering our shoulders. Any questions? Now we have flexion and extension. I had to look very hard to find this photo. Flexion and extension is kind of difficult to understand with other parts of the body, but this is a pretty good example. So when you're bending your shoulders inwards and you're kind of just like folding in on yourself, that would be flexion. You're bending in. And extension, when you're kind of stretching your back, extending your back, straightening it as much as you can, you're basically bending outwards. So that would be called extension. Do you guys get that? Cool. Okay. We have some other movements. We have hyperextension, which would be extending past the lower limit. So in this picture, the normal way to stand would be kind of like the first pair of legs, and a hyperextended knee, which like when you stand really, really straight, and sometimes it can even hurt when you're doing it. So it would be like straightening it way past its actual limit. So you're hyperextending your knee. We have dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So dorsiflexion would be the action of bending. So you're bending it upwards, you're bending your foot upwards. And then plantar flexion would be the action of bending your foot downwards. You're bringing your foot down. Do you guys see that in the diagram? Cool. Plantar flexion is involved with so many kinds of tests in medicine. We're not going to go into that, but just be familiar with these words: plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, and of course, everyone knows what rotation is, right? So in this case, the man is rotating his neck left and right. So it's basically the twisting or turning around an axis, kind of like the rotation of the Earth. The Earth has an axis, the body has one too. Okay, supination is basically rotating towards the sky. Again, something I had to look hard to find. It's basically you're putting your arm facing upwards, your palm is facing upwards, and pronation would mean that your palm, is facing downwards. You're rotating it towards the ground. Don't worry about neutral. We're not going to go over that. Does everyone get that? Okay, and then circumduction. So circum, what does that remind you of? What word? It has to do with circles. So circumference. Yeah, circumference, when you're taking the circumference of a circle. So basically, circumduction in medicine means rotating in circles at joint. So kind of like, you know that one exercise where they make you rotate your arms like big circles and tiny circles? So that movement would be called circumduction. I think we're good. Now we're gonna go deeper into the head and the trunk of the muscles. Yeah, you do it with the legs too. Okay. So we're gonna go over the head and the neck first, the lateral side. So we have the frontalis, which we talked about. When I'm wrinkling my forehead, which muscle is involved in that? Frontalis. Frontalis is involved with that. Now, temporalis is the muscle near our temples, kind of like the temporal bone that we talked about last week. It is responsible for mastication. Mastication is basically chewing. Basically, when you're eating, it's that process that's involved with that. We have the occipitalis, which is the muscle at the back of the head, which is above the neck. So we were talking about it earlier with the trapezium, and the origin of the trapezium is at the occipitalis muscle. But don't worry about that. And the frontalis and temporalis are connected by the cranial, I'm going to mess this word up, aponeurosis, which is basically tissue or fascia that is connecting your forehead to the back of your head. Do you see that? Like, it's like red near the frontalis and then it's red near the occipitalis, but in the middle it's kind of white. That's the cranial aponeurosis. It's basically this tissue that's always connecting the front of your head to the back of your head. Okay. Now we're going to go over the orbicular oculi, which is basically surrounding the eye, the muscle that surrounds the eye. Sternocleidomastoid. Oh, we're going to talk about that later. We're going to go over it. So, the muscle that moves your ears. So the temporalis is right above your ear. Do you see that? Do you see where your ear is and where the temporalis is at the side of your head? The little muscle that's basically in the middle of your head. Yeah, so when you raise that muscle, when it contracts, it's going to raise your ears, so then your ears move. But your ear doesn't have a muscle in itself. Yeah, your temporalis always moves when you chew because it's responsible for mastication. Your chewing is controlled by the temporalis. Okay, we're going to talk about the orbicular oculi. So orbicular, when I hear that word, I kind of think of like surrounding. Yeah, Christopher, what's your question? Yeah, so like orbit, so surrounding, so it's around or surrounding the eye. Oculi would mean eye. And now we have the orbicular oris. So when you guys, like, when you hear the word oris, what do you think? Yeah, oral oris, it's the mouth. So orbicular, surrounding, around the mouth, oris, the mouth. We have the, I'm going to mess this word up, buccinator, I don't know. English is confusing. The buccinator is the cheek muscle. It is the muscle that is on top of your cheek. And we have another cheek muscle called the zygomaticus. And that lifts the cheek. We're going to learn something super, super interesting about the zygomaticus, and anyone who has dimples will be surprised. Okay. Who here has dimples and wants to learn why and how they have dimples? You'll learn about them. Okay. Masseter. We talked about it earlier. It is the strongest muscle in our body, and it is responsible for chewing, and it clamps the mouth shut. So look for the masseter. It is basically right near your jawbone. So it's responsible for chewing. And someone asked about the sternocleidomastoid. So that is what helps turn our head, and it is connected to our sternum. And it is also connected to our mastoid process, which is basically near the masseter. Okay. Is everyone good with that? So the masseter part white. So basically, on top of the masseter, that area that's white is some type of tissue and fascia, just like the cranial aponeurosis. You see that white part? That's basically fascia. It is a mouthful. Okay. Can we move on from this slide? Okay. So next we have the platysma and the trapezius. They're really not really they're not on your face, they're kind of on your neck. So the platysma is covering the front of your neck, and it attaches onto your clavicle and your ribs. So when you're turning your head, nodding it up and down, that's what the platysma is for. Now the trapezius, we talked about it earlier, is it's basically near the occipitalis. That's where the occipitalis is the origin for the trapezius. It's connected to the bottom of the skull. And it is also connected to our scapula and our backbone, and it helps lifts our arms and shoulders. So it brings them up. That's what it helps with. So do you guys see where the trapezius is? It's kind of covering the back of your neck while the platysma is covering the front of your neck. Okay. Now we're here. Fun fact about the dimples. So your zygomaticus is kind of like any other muscle, smooth, just kind of there, you know. But when you have dimples, it is split up into two parts. Do you see that little hole where that orange thing is? It's like there's one here and then there's one there. It's kind of split in the middle. So when you have that split, there's no muscle covering that tissue. So it's kind of like a little bump. I mean, not little bump, like a depression into your cheek. So that's what causes our dimples to form. Dimples are when someone smiles, do you ever see like the little hole in their cheek? That's what we call dimples, and this is how they're formed. Just search it up. You'll know it. You've seen them before, definitely. Okay, now we're going to talk about the trunk, the posterior side of the trunk. Okay, so we have the pectoralis major, which abducts. What does abducts mean? Does anyone remember? Take away. So it's taking it away from the midline. So it abducts the humerus. It takes your arms away from the midline and moves our scapula up and down, our shoulder muscles up and down. Our shoulder up and down. We have the serratus anterior, which pulls the scapula forward around the thorax. So when you kind of shrivel up and your shoulders are getting pulled into your chest, so it's your thorax is basically your throat area, your neck, your chest. So when you're pulling your shoulders forward, it's kind of like forming around the thorax. So that's what the serratus anterior helps with. We have the intercostal muscles, which allow for breathing between the ribs. So between the costals, the ribs, between the ribs, intercostals. Anyone have any questions? Are you saying the muscles look like gum? That's funny. I haven't heard that one before. Yes, muscles help connect all the organs. They're even inside the organs, like smooth muscles. So basically, when we talk about the reproductive system, we're going to talk about menstruation, and basically the muscles in your uterus are contracting. they're getting rid of the inner lining of the uterus. So, and they do that by contracting. So that's how you get the cramps, because your uterus is literally contracting 24/7 while you're having your period. So we're going to talk about the trapezius next. Yes, that could be a cool science fair project, making a model of a skeleton with gum and bones. Okay, we have the trapezius next. We talked about this earlier. Brings back the arms and tilts the head back. We have the latissimus dorsi. We also talked about this earlier. It helps with the movement of our shoulders, our scapula. It is the largest muscle in the upper part of our body, the largest muscle. So it's kind of like by your side where like your waist is. Oh, yes, I can go back. Which one do you need me to go back to, Shri? Great. I think we might have to split up the nervous system because we only have 30 minutes and it's a lot to go through. That's okay though. Okay, we have the levator scapula. So levator, what is that like remind you of? Elevation? Yeah, so it's bringing your shoulders up. It's bringing your scapula up. So levator scapula. See, this is how you can make medicine easy for you. So a lot of the words in medical terminology are basically combined forms of Latin. So levator in Latin would mean bringing something up. So scapula, bringing our shoulder up. We have the rhomboides major, which brings our shoulder blades together. It's like when you stretch your shoulders back, you're pulling them back, your shoulder blades are touching, and that is because the rhomboides major is working. It is bringing your shoulder blades back. Okay, internal abdominal oblique. So what that is responsible for, it's basically one of the muscles in your abdomen. It helps with movements in the trunk, in your upper area, above your head, above your legs, and below your neck. It maintains the normal tension in this area, and it increases the pressure in this area. And what the external abdominal oblique does, it pulls the chest downwards and compresses the abdominal cavity, which increases intra-abdominal pressure. So basically, let me make that simple for you. So it pulls your chest down, like your diaphragm. It basically just like smushes everything together, and when it does that, it makes more pressure in our torso. It makes more pressure in our trunk. It makes more pressure in our chest and our abdomen. So that's what the external abdominal oblique does. We have the transverse abdominis, which basically moves our trunk. It also stabilizes our spine. It creates tension in the anterior body wall and increases the pressure in our abdomen when this muscle contracts. So when this muscle contracts, it creates more pressure and it stabilizes our spine. And we have our rectus abdominis, which flexes our spine forward and which eventually bends our body forward. So when we're bending our body forward, like you're sitting in a chair and you're bending your body forward, your rectus abdominis is helping with that. Okay, does anyone have any questions about anything? Okay. Oh, why is this not working? It's not letting me go back. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so when you're in space, the reason you have to wear that suit is because it controls, there's different pressures on different planets outside of our planet. So we have to wear that pressure suit because the pressure in our abdomen, the pressure in our brain, the pressure everywhere will get messed up and our organs can't handle that. We're going to go over the eyes and the nervous system, the entire structure and everything. Okay, now we're gonna go over the arms and legs. So arms are upper extremities. We're gonna go over the anterior side. So we have the flexor carpi radialis. Does anyone remember what I said about the radius, our radial bone? It is near our, which side is it on? Is it near our pinky side or our thumb side? Does anyone remember? Yes, it's on our thumb side. So our flexor carpi radialis is on our radius side, and it bends the wrist from the side of our thumb. And our flexor carpi ulnaris, our ulna, was on which side? The pinky side. Yeah, so it bends our wrist from our pinky side. And we have the palmaris longus, and that bends our hand at the palm. So when you bend your palm, that's what muscle is working. Palmaris, palm, longus, long. That's how you kind of get things in medicine. We have the brachioradialis, which connects the arm to the forearm, your upper arm to your forearm, and it rotates the arm. So you have a bunch of muscles just here and there, just working together, this kind of mess of just things connecting to each other. But yes, I'm going to move on to the next slide now. We have the biceps brachii, which flexes our arm. So it contracts our biceps. What happens, when our biceps contract? Does anyone remember? Agonist, antagonist? Yes, our triceps relax. So triceps brachii, they relax, which extends our forearm, the forearm below our elbow. It extends that, it straightens it out. We have our subscapularis, which is underneath our scapula, sub, like submarine, under, marine would be water, underwater, subscapularis, under the scapula, allows to stretch the arm behind the back. Okay, now we're gonna go over the posterior side of our arms. We have the brachialis between the triceps and it's basically between the triceps and the biceps, and it helps lift our arms up. We have the triceps brachii, which extends, which straightens our forearm, along with the help of our deltoid. Our deltoid is like our shoulder muscle. We have the biceps brachii, which flexes our arms, which helps contract our arms. We have the deltoid muscle, which abducts the arm, and it's the muscle at our shoulder. Abducts, which means, what does abduct mean, guys? I'm gonna keep reviewing this with you because something you should memorize. Steal, take away. So what would abducting the arm mean? Would it mean to bring it up, or would it mean to bring it down? Yes, bring it up. When you're stretching your arms all the way to the sky, your deltoid is helping. We have the extensor carpi ulnaris, which extends the wrist, the ulna side. Ulnaris, ulna side. So which side is that? I know you know it. Pinky. Pinky. Yes. And then we have the extensor digiti minimi. It's so much fun saying these names because it's like Latin and it's like minimi digiti. It extends our pinky. We have the extensor digitorum, which extends our fingers. So extends, straightens. So anytime you see extensor, extend, or anything like that in medicine, that means straighten. What does that mean? Type it. Straighten. Yes. Okay, we have the brachioradialis, which connects our arm to our forearm, rotating our arms. So I think you guys find this familiar because I just talked about it on the anterior side. These muscles all work together. They're not just in one place. They all work together, and something that happens in something else makes a different reaction in another muscle. So that's why they have a whole different class in high school and college and medical school, and that's called medical terminology. So you basically get to learn all of these words, and Latin is also the root language for English. So a lot of Latin words and Latin roots are very similar to English words. So sometimes you'll get it, but sometimes they're different. So you'll get the hang of things once you study that. Is there an easier way to remember these terms? There is never an easier way to remember anything except practice it, except see it over and over again, and always try to understand and combine things together to like see how things connect. That is the easiest way to honestly understand medical terminology. And for me, it was really hard at first, but then I got it. By the end of the year, by the time I was done with that class, I definitely understood like, oh, if they're saying something like extensor, that means extend. Radialis, that means the radial bone or the radial muscle. So that would mean the side of the thumb. Like you understand what I'm saying? Once you see these over and over again, you see how they connect. So now we're going to talk about the muscles used to rotate the arm. This is also called the rotator cuff. So we have 4 rotator cuff muscles. We have the supraspinatus, we have the infraspinatus, we have the teres minor and the teres major. So these work together to basically rotate your shoulders, rotate your arms, and do all that good stuff. So supraspinatus basically means like spine of the scapula. So just it's above your scapula. Supra, above. So if you look at the first diagram, it's the first word there, and if you look at it, it's like the light pink side. It's above your clavicle. That little bone in the middle, it's your clavicle, and your supraspinatus is above that. So it's called supra, above. And we have the infraspinatus, which is the spine of the scapula, but it is below the clavicle. It's below the clavicle because it says infra. Infra means below. We have the teres minor, which is the muscle in our upper arm. So if you look at the second diagram, we have the teres minor, which is kind of like above the teres major. So just get a feel for that. They're both muscles that control the humerus. Shri, which one did you want me to go back to? Sorry, I saw that late. Okay, so we have the lower extremity leg. So basically, those are your legs, and it's the anterior side of our legs. That's what we're going to look at. So we have the vastus medialis, which extends the leg at the knee and helps stabilize the patella. What is the patella, guys? It's the kneecap, the knee bone. Yes, that is the patella. It helps stabilize the patella and helps do what to the leg? Look at the word in the definition. What does that word mean? It starts with an E. I made you guys say it. Extend means what? Straighten. Extend means straighten. So when I say extend the leg, straighten the leg at the knee and stabilize the patella. We have the tibialis anterior, which is another muscle, and it is at the front of the shin and is responsible for dorsiflexion, and it helps extend the tarsals. We talked about this earlier. Extending the tarsals would mean that it straightens our toes. Tarsals are the bones in our foot. So when we say it extends the tarsals, it straightens our tarsals. We have the gracilis, which abducts the hip and brings our leg back. So abducts. Come on, what does abduct mean? Take away. Yes, abducts our hip. Just remember that. Take away from what? Take away from what? The middle of our body, the midline. We have the gluteus maximus. What is the gluteus maximus, everybody? Yes, that is exactly what it is. And it extends the hip. And what was it again? It was the largest muscle of the body, right? We learned in our fun facts, it was the largest muscle. Yes. Okay. We have the ilioposas, I think. I don't know. Again, this is Latin, and I can't speak Latin. So this muscle helps flexes our hip. We have the sartorius, which rotates the leg. We have the rectus femoris, again, femur, which straightens the leg and is at the front of the thigh. Okay, guys, let's be mature about it. We've moved on from that. What is the rectus femoris? What does it do? Come on. Yes, the rectus femoris straightens our leg. Our vastus lateralis is the muscle that extends the knee joint. What does it do? It straightens the knee joint and moves the lower leg forward. That's what the vastus lateralis does. Okay, so we also have the biceps femoris, which flexes the leg and is at the back of the thigh. We have the soleus, so when I say soleus, what does that remind you of? Kind of like sole of the foot, right? So it helps control the sole of the foot. It helps with the plantar. It helps plantar flexion, which means kind of like tiptoe. Helps control the ankle. It is capable of exerting forces on the ankle joint. We have the gastrocnemius, which also helps with tiptoeing, the plantar flexion, and it is at the back of the shin. Okay, now we're going to go over some medical roots. So we have duct to draw. We have fascia, or fascio, which basically means fascia. It is a band of tissue that surrounds the muscles. We have fibro, which basically means fibers. We have flexo, which means to bend. We have leomio, which basically means smooth visceral muscle. We have myo and myoso, which both means muscle. We have rab. Again, it's kind of hard to say these roots just by themselves because they have connecting vowels and they connect to suffixes and prefixes. We have rhabdomyo, I think, which basically means skeletal or striated muscle. Striated, can anyone tell me what striated means? We talked about it earlier with skeletal muscle. I think this is a slide. Yeah, so it was stripes. So striated means stripes. It's kind of like bands of dark and light tissues. We have sarco, which is like soft or fleshy. It's another word for connective tissue. And we have tenso, which is to stretch. So tenso, kind of like tension, stretching. So those are our the 10 that I chose to teach you guys, but there are so many more roots, prefixes, and suffixes that have to do with all of these. Again, you can go over them later. Now we're going to talk about some diseases and conditions. So one of the most popular diseases that we talk about in the muscular system is muscular dystrophy, which is basically a group of diseases that weaken the muscular system and make it harder to move. It weakens your muscles. So that is what muscular dystrophy does to the body. We have tendinosis, which is a disease that causes the tendons to kind of like break down and form scar tissues. And this happens when the tendons are weakened. We have fibromyalgia syndrome, or FMS, which is a basically widespread chronic pain. This is becoming increasingly more common because of artificial foods that we eat. They affect our body in so many different ways. Everything affects our muscles. So the video recording will be on our YouTube channel by today, this night, or maybe tomorrow. I'll send the link out by email in the next email that I send. We have the mitochondrial myopathy, which is basically a defect in how ATP, which is basically energy in our body. ATP helps control everything in our body. It's produced in the mitochondria, it makes it hard for the mitochondria to produce energy from our food, which causes the muscle cells in our body to become damaged and weak. It makes us feel weak. We have myasthenia gravis. It's another very common disease of the muscular system. This is basically when the immune system attacks the junction between the nerves and the muscles, making it hard for your brain to communicate with the muscles. It also makes the muscles feel weak. So when something is attacking your nerves, the nerves between your muscles, do you think that your muscles will be able to control anything if it's not getting any instructions from the brain? What do you think? No. Our muscles will not be able to work. They will not be able to move without the brain sending it instructions. So that's why myasthenia gravis is so very, very terrible.